right, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to call to order the 12 p.m. special PSVS meeting of March 7th, 2023. Our first item is, Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz.
Here.
Vice Chair Abernathy.
Here.
Committee Member Madland.
Here.
Committee Member Dewey.
Here.
Committee Member Perez Andreessen. Committee Member Campbell.
Here.
Committee Member Coman.
Here.
Committee Member Rojas Mora. Here. And Committee Member Prince.
Here.
All right, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public comments.
All right, statements for items listed on today's agenda are given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total per agenda item. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, give them to the clerk, who will give copies to the committee. If you're here to make a public statement, please fill out a speaker card and hand it to the city clerk. Madam Clerk, do we have any speaker cards that have been submitted?
We have not received any speaker cards for items on the agenda.
I'm just going to look out over the audience. Don't see anybody running for the back to fill out a speaker card. All right, next item, please.
New business. Item A, selection of chairperson and vice chairperson.
All right. So this is our first item of business. At this time, we'll be electing a new chair and vice chair to serve for a 1-year term. I will first open nominations for the chair, and once all nominations are received, the clerk will provide ballots. So nominations are now open.
I nominate Kathy Abernathy.
Okay. Nominate Mr. Ortiz.
Yes. So I'm going to turn to our city attorney. We have 2 nominations. And the process is?
And the process, thank you, Chair. The process is that the ballots will be circulated and that you would vote for one person.
Got it.
The majority would win.
Doing 2 separate ballots, there's another one coming around for the, like, okay.
For the vice chair? Okay,
I
perfect.
probably should have paid attention when she was talking to me. I apologize.
Here you go, Julie. Thank you. All old school, all hand counting, all hand counts. Inspection of the ballots to follow.
We have a tie vote with both candidates receiving 4 votes.
Back to you, Mr. City Attorney. What is our process at this point? Rochambeau? That's what I was going to say, flip a coin. Yeah.
It sounds logically that we could do a revote, or it's a tie vote, so
Coin toss? No.
I don't know.
Papers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it possible to delay this item until our next meeting?
I think so. That's probably the appropriate.
Because I think a revote would
It would
basically be the
same.
same result.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So is that, I mean,
You can. There's
I'll drop out. I'll drop out. I know what the revote is.
okay.
A second.
okay. So then
We remove a nomination.
remove the nomination.
Okay.
So then let's just then take a.
A revote.
We could just.
Or can we do,
would
it by,
just make
can we
a
do it by acclamation?
Yes, or just make a motion in a second
Okay. So,
to appoint Nick Ortiz as the chair.
I make a motion to appoint Mr. Ortiz as chair.
Second.
all those in favor? Or I'm sorry. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. I apologize. I was doing things the chamber way.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Abernathy, Committee Member Madland, Committee Member Dewey, Committee Member Perez Andreessen is absent, Committee Member Campbell,
Aye.
Committee Member Coman,
Aye.
Committee Member Rojas Mora, and Committee Member Prince. Motion is approved with Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent.
All right. So now for the selection of vice chair, do we have a motion? Mr. Cam, you're,
Yeah, we couldn't hear you.
Tell you what your motion is.
okay.
You're nominating.
Is there nominating?
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We've got a first and a second for Mr. Campbell to serve as vice chair. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
So we're not going to do a ballot. We're just going to do it by motion. Is there any other? Just ask if there's.
Okay, is there any other nominations? Yes, I don't want to shill any other nominations. Seeing none. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Abernathy,
Aye.
Committee Member Madland, Committee Member Dewey,
We're kicking you out.
Committee Member Perez Andreessen is absent. Committee Member Campbell,
Aye.
Committee Member Coman,
Aye.
Committee Member Rojas Mora, and Committee Member Prince.
Aye.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent.
Does that start now, or when's it start?
Yeah.
Right now?
So should I move there?
Yes.
It's fine.
Play some musical chairs. Do we want to do that? I mean, can she move the names, or should we keep?
We can have them move, and we'll staff can track who to call on.
I'm just thinking about KGov, you know, our star turn, you know. All right, now back to my cheat sheet. All right, okay. Madam Clerk, our next item.
Adoption of minutes from the April 21st, 2022 Oversight Committee meeting.
All right, you all have been distributed the minutes in the packet, and they're in the packet in front of you. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes as presented by the city clerk?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion by Committee Member Coleman, second by Committee Member Prince. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
I'll abstain from this vote. I don't have sufficient information.
Committee Member Madlin? Aye. Committee Member Dewey?
Aye.
President Andreessen is absent. Committee Member Coman?
Aye.
Committee Member Abernathy?
Aye.
Committee Member Rojas Mora? Committee Member Prince?
Aye.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent and Committee Members Campbell and Rojas Mora abstaining.
All right. Next item, please.
Fiscal year 2022-23 mid-year budget recommendations.
All right. City Manager Clegg, we'll turn to you.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Just as a quick overarching reminder about mid-year versus regular year process. The mid-year process is typically a much more brief consideration. We are looking at a very, I think, narrow set of funding recommendations, and I would even suggest last year and this year having significant one-time balances available is also atypical. We don't usually look at this amount of funding at a mid-year process, and so we typically don't make a lot of changes at mid-year, but when we do make, one-time recommendations for those dollars, of course, we want to have oversight committee feedback input, as well as ultimately council approval on those items. But again, the process for the full budget review will involve much more lengthy presentations from the departments about what their proposals are. And I'm thinking a series of probably 2 to 3 meetings that are longer than this meeting to walk through the entire annual budget process. I do think with the advance information on these topics that we can get through this short list of items pretty expeditiously today. Just as a quick overview, again, our revenues have generally met or exceeded initial budget estimates. For curiosity's sake, this group looks, exclusively at our public safety vital services tax, but for your benefit, our property tax is on track, development fees are on track. Our transient occupancy tax, we've seen some ups and downs quarter to quarter, but over the annual year, we're on track there. And our Bradley Burns, the typical sales tax is actually expected to meet our budget estimates, but our PSVS tax for this coming year actually is trending close, but a little below some of our estimates. But because of our significant one-time balance that you're going to see some information on in the coming slides, we feel like we're going to be in good shape there because we're going to be able to address that with those one-time revenues. It is giving us a lot to think about going into next year, though, with a potential slowdown in the economy forecasted. We're going to have very conservative revenue estimates in the coming year. So, again, some reminders. When we close the books on June 30th of each year, we then go through a closeout process where there may be some revisions, adjustments, last invoices, payments coming through. And so it takes us through typically about August for us to fully close our books at the city. And then from August through the end of the calendar year, that's when we have our external third-party financial auditors take a deep dive and audit our books in preparation of our annual comprehensive financial report. And so we really don't look at those year-end balances until we're at the mid-year process of the fiscal year, because we've taken that time to close our books, audit our books, and be really clear about where our final expenditures are. So again, final revenues were more than anticipated for the last fiscal year. Our expenditures were slightly less than anticipated. That's been a topic for those that have been on this committee for a longer time. For the first few years, we saw significant amounts of expenditures did not get fully expended because we hadn't hired all of the officers that were in the budget, or we hadn't completed projects. And this year, we saw that shrink notably. So as we continue to get projects completed and get more folks hired, the the amount of expenditures under budget was much smaller, although there still was some notable vacancies that did generate some of those one-time savings. And so all PSVS funds that are the fund balance available after the end of last fiscal year was $19 million. What's important to reflect on that is we're not actually asking this committee to take action on $19 million, and there's a couple reasons. That was the amount of funding that was in the fund balance, but we have a reserve policy adopted by the City Council that for any one-time fund balance, 25% of that fund balance automatically goes into reserves. And so we have pursued that council policy and already included in our recommendations for mid-year budget for the council to take those funds and put them directly into the reserves. There's also some, as I mentioned, there are those anticipated revenue reductions, or no, excuse me, the estimates of revenue collections that aren't going to be quite as high as anticipated. And so we've taken some of those one-time funds to offset those amounts. And so what we're looking at I was speaking to the slide without clicking it forward, but we are looking at some strategic allocations of one-time funds, but not the total amount that was just presented. And then even within what's available, we're recommending only half of that be used for some strategic needs at this mid-year time, and the rest we're recommending be set aside for this coming budget year because we anticipate it being a tighter, budget year with the slowdown. We think we should have more reserves and contingencies set aside for next year. So with that, I'll walk through each of these 4 buckets, but this is just an overarching summary of what we're looking at. Some limited dollars around public safety, significant investment in homelessness, and we have a little bit in quality of life. And the maintaining fiscal solvency, that's more about reserves, but we'll come to that in a minute. So the total amount of available funds is actually $14 million, not $19 million after we set aside those automatic reserves. But we're only recommending about half of that again for funding allocation. So let me walk through each of the items. Our police training facility was purchased by the city as actually part of a roads improvement project. And when we converted that to a general fund, general use, we have to pay back the cost of that building because it was funded through federal infrastructure dollars, and we have to pay those dollars back. This training facility has been critical in our ability to have 2 dedicated academies every year to achieve our goals for police hiring. And so I feel a very direct nexus and connection to the Public Safety Vital Services tax. And even though it was built and has been in operation for several years now, we're still paying back the costs for its purchase back to the roads project. And this would not be the final installment, but it would be close to the final installment. There would be one more payment after this to have that fully paid off.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
How are you going to pay it off if we didn't have the sales tax increase? What fund would it have come out of?
It just would not have been built.
You wouldn't have built it if we hadn't passed the sales tax increase?
Correct. And again, the training facility was built very specifically to reach those hiring goals, to have our two dedicated academies each year. What was the I do not have that, but that's a good question. Our finance director may help me out there.
Good afternoon. The actual appraised value was a little over, basically $2.5 million. So that was what the actual purchase price was back when we moved forward with the building of that road, project, starting on that road project. I'm sorry? That was property, yeah, there was no construction. The actual construction came out of PSVS. So once we purchased the facility, then we started using PSVS dollars to actually remodel the facility as a training building.
Sorry, just to clarify for all those, just the facility was purchased for the TRIP projects, and the city
Exactly.
owned it before PSVS was actually passed.
Yes, exactly. They purchased the building as required required purchase to build the variable space for the roads. So they purchased it well before we had passed the measure in 2018. It remained vacant. So we weren't sure if we were going to sell it or what other uses there were for it. But then when PSVS passed, we saw the facility as something that could be used for the training facility.
And so legally, my question is, we're required to
Yes.
repay
Yes, we
the
used
fund, the specific fund.
exactly. We used road funds to purchase all acquisition property for the road, the Centennial Corridor. So that has to be, if we're not using it for another road project, those funds have to be reimbursed to then be used for future road projects. All I can tell you is what the appraised value was. Thank you.
Okay. Our next section around homelessness, as we presented to the City Council on October 19th of last year, a game plan for what would be really a next phase of programs in support of addressing homelessness. So we've actually had two different phases prior to that. We're kind of calling this our third phase of programs in support of homelessness. And just to give some context, we have allocated $17 million in 3 previous budget cycles to affordable housing. We have been committing about $12 million a year in recurring costs in support of programs that address homeless encampments as well as homeless services at our Brundage Lane Navigation Center. But homelessness continues to now be issue number 1, as opposed to a few years back, I reported our issue number 1 was public safety, but it really now is homelessness. So this is the next phase of programs that we proposed to council in October to help address homelessness and present them now for consideration. We submitted an application for state funding for affordable housing and received a $2.6 million essentially grant, but it's a 1-to-1 match. And so to get that $2.6 million for affordable housing requires this $2.6 million match to put city funds into our affordable housing trust fund. Private security, as we continue to look at policing and addressing challenges, particularly in our commercial corridors, that we feel like having additional eyes and ears, and this is a program that would include foot traffic, bicycle patrols, and vehicle patrols for private security throughout commercial districts citywide. We've done some pilots in the downtown area and had private security assisting in some of our hotspot areas. But this is to provide private security additional support to law enforcement in all of our commercial areas to address vandalism, vagrancy, and commercial and retail theft in all of our commercial areas. We've continued to look at the best way to police that challenge and that issue. And I wouldn't say today that our preferred form of policing will always be to supplement some of our work of law enforcement, but we feel like both it's an economical solution as well as we just try to hire up more police officers, this is an immediate action that we can take to have more personnel hours addressing security in our commercial areas with immediate effect as we continue to hire up. So this is something that we'll do for the next, we think, 2 to 3 years and then reevaluate. The shopping cart containment subsidy program is a city council adopted a new ordinance requiring shopping cart containment systems at all retail locations of a certain size. Now there are some small locations that it may not be required. But for most of your large shopping centers, this requires them to somehow keep a better control on shopping carts. One of the number one complaints from our law enforcement officers, rapid response teams, and homeless outreach teams is that the shopping carts pose a big challenge in how much material is being cleaned up after they're addressing homeless encampments. And the goal is to reduce the number of shopping carts that are not being used appropriately. Of course, there's a number of shopping carts that are out there today, but this removes the future number of shopping carts that may be used for purposes for which they were not intended. And the City Council wanted to create a incentive program that helps private businesses pay for this installation, so it's not too much of a burden on private business. This new requirement that they have to build some or create some kind of shopping cart containment system. That ordinance was passed a little more than 6 months ago. It had a 6-month time frame for which people had to get compliant. We've just hit that 6 months. We haven't had too many individuals request this grant or incentive payment yet, but because it is now required and code enforcement starting to do some follow-up, we expect there could be some additional requests for that grant program, and this would fund that program from Public Safety Vital Services tax dollars. And our total exposure, if every business requested, is actually much higher than this total. But there's the potential for some braiding of funds, as well as we want to just see what the experience is first before we fully allocate the total amount. But the incentive program has a tiered approach where anywhere from, I believe it was $15,000 up to a higher amount, I believe $25,000 of incentive to help offset those costs based on the size of the business. Again, if every business asked the full amount that they're eligible for, it would be close to $700,000 in grant incentives. That could be the full exposure, but we're requesting a much smaller amount until we see what the actual requests are, because some businesses are going ahead and installing these systems and not asking for city funds to help them with it. Next.
I have a question. I've never seen it. I know they're doing this, but is this, so at the farthest extremity, if I had one of these, I just park it there, sleep and live there in the parking lot of the supermarket, right? I mean, what happens?
I think,
what cities are doing this, and how does it work?
so there's actually a number of different types of systems. Some systems are that it has a locking system on the wheels, that if you push your cart too far, there's what they call a geofence, and if you get past that geofence, your wheels lock up. There are others that actually have a little scanning machine, and you have to scan your cart as you enter the store, and you have to scan it as you exit. You can't even take your cart out of the store, and then you have to carry your bags, but some vendors are choosing to require people to only use carts within the store. One other system that I haven't seen yet in Bakersfield, but is allowed within our ordinances, that if they put bollards outside the front doors of a store, that the shopping carts couldn't make it through the bollards, but they could at least make it out the door, then they would have an employee out there gathering up the carts closer to the entrance, putting them back inside. So the main goal, again, is carts don't leave the premises. They don't leave the larger property. There's a couple different ways to achieve that, and we've left some space to private business to determine what's best suited to their business, so long as it doesn't leave the area. Another option is that they would just have employees, dedicated employees, collecting those carts and not letting people walk off with those carts. So a number of different options. The way we designed our program, though, is we're not going to get on the hook for ongoing costs. And we know there are some ongoing costs, but the businesses will have to bear those. There's a one-time incentive that you can get to help offset the initial capital investment for putting a containment system on your property.
Committee Member Matland.
Oh, I really feel this is a vendor issue, not a city issue. And as any fund goes, the money is grabbed so quick by the larger companies because they're the first to find out and, are easier to go through the paperwork from my own experience. And then also you mentioned the geofence, and I mean, it works on my dogs. We have geofence on equipment and service trucks at my cost. And I just don't think this is an issue for the city. It is a vendor issue. It's always been a vendor issue with companies, the Small Grocers Association or the Targets and other companies in the world. The geofence would work. There's a number of things, but that should really be a retailer issue, not a public issue for funds that need to go to police and fire.
We'll take that as feedback. Again, that conversation was had at the council level of should we offer incentive or not, and the council was trying to balance the impact of private business versus available public funds, but we'll take that as valuable feedback.
Also, the geofence is not that expensive of an item to do, especially once you do something in bulk like that. Really drops the cost. So.
And appreciate that feedback too. And our argument as staff has been that there's a cost benefit to the businesses. That we do feel like that in the long run, this saves them money from having to buy more shopping carts and do more maintenance. And so we definitely recommended an incentive level that was not full cost replacement because there is a business benefit for this as well. But again, a council determination and reflection of putting a new requirement on businesses to have some offset there.
Vice Chair Campbell?
Thank you. I have a question. It sounds like these funds were already approved by the city council. If we didn't have this additional sales tax money, how would this be paid for?
Yeah, good question. So the way I would characterize is the council approved the program, but didn't approve where all the funds would come from. We did look at our Economic Opportunity Area Grant program, that this could be a way to help pay for those that were in those eligible areas. We had ARPA monies that we thought could potentially be eligible in, again, qualified census tracts, but that wouldn't cover everything citywide. And otherwise, the funds would have to come out of our economic development miscellaneous dollars that are typically support recruiting and retaining businesses. Otherwise, those would be potential areas to try and draw from. And it was my recommendation to council that it would be much cleaner to try and identify a funding source like PSVS to help pay for this program.
Another question on this, and I realize you may not know the answer to this, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there a policy in the Bakersfield Police Department against making arrests for possession of stolen property or theft for the possession of these carts?
There is not a policy against that. What I would characterize is, again, there's two different things actually. So we don't put our officers in the position to make a determination of whether that cart and the materials inside it were the property of that individual or where it came from, because we actually don't know in that moment, when did they get that cart, how long have they had it, where did it come from. We don't ask the officers to determine whether the cart is stolen property because there is some case law about, if it's been in that person's possession for so long, is it their property or not? That's sort of a different question. But what we do is we have encouraged vendors to go around and also collect up their carts, and we help and support them in that. And if we find abandoned carts, we remove them as quickly as possible. As far as arrests for stolen goods or stolen property, again, that's in the moment, our officers determine where that falls in a priority of other calls for service and other crimes that are taking place, and so arresting folks for maybe stolen property as carts hasn't been the highest priority for general patrol, but we have a team called our impact team that deals specifically with encampments and other hotspot types of issues. So our rapid response teams and our impact teams do leverage the ability to enforce on that topic, even though our general patrol does not.
Committee Member Matland.
Actually, the cost of these carts have come way down, kind of like a lot of things we use now, where the carts were stainless steel with better wheels, better bearings. Now, traditionally, like everything else we buy, it's a throwaway item. So the value is bought in bulk has come down so significantly. I mean, I've heard around $150. So to repair those things, they're kind of a throwaway item now. So.
And I could tell you from many of our cleanups, a lot of them do end up in the landfill.
Committee Member Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This probably will fall underneath this category. My question is in regards to small businesses that are suffering from the vandalism that's caused by a lot of the homeless population in this community. Has the council considered any type of set-aside to help these small businesses deal with some of this vandalism? For an example, if windows are shattered or doors are shattered, a lot of businesses do not know who to contact in regards to boarding up their business to protect their valuables even further. Has the city considered setting aside funding to help these small businesses in regards to these type of activities? Another example would be these companies, small businesses that have deductibles for their insurance purposes. As you know, that's an ongoing cost, and the more claims you have, the higher your insurance is going to continue to rise, and so it becomes a long-term effect on a lot of small businesses as well. But if there was some type of program where these small businesses could contact the city, if the city would be able to negotiate, for an example, with a company that would board up these windows or these doors at a agreeable price for the city, so that at least these small businesses would have somewhere to go to get immediate help in regards to things that, unfortunately, that they cannot control.
Yeah, committee member, another good question. There has been conversation in general about vandalism and actually specifically about broken windows as well, because it is just a big frustration point for a lot of our small businesses. So a couple things that the city has taken action on. There is $500,000 that was carved out of the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funds. We took $500,000 out of that to create what we're calling a security grant pilot project, where we would make grant dollars available to businesses, and we actually included nonprofits in that program as well, that they could request funds to help do site hardening. Now, that's not window replacement, and we actually we're developing what the actual program criteria are today, but what we're considering is 3 different tiers. The first tier would be if you don't have a security camera or security light, that's step number 1. You know, you light it up, get surveillance. If you've already done that, then you could get some grant funding for some site hardening. Do you put a roll down on your business? Do you put some bollards or fencing that make it harder to get into the business? Do you some other crime prevention through environmental design, site hardening, to help those businesses not have as many break-ins or impacts of vandalism or vagrancy? And then the last step is actually for organized business districts to have some assistance even in private security. So that program is designed to get at broadly that same issue, but a different angle than window replacements. Second piece I would point to is that $1.1 million that's up on the screen was designed specifically at addressing the impacts to businesses and small businesses of, some of the vagrancy that is happening. And I will say, I'm using the term vagrancy on purpose because the vandalism and vagrancy is sometimes perpetrated by those who may be experiencing homelessness, but we know there are others who are perpetrating the same. But it's a problem either way, and so we're trying to address that through this private security. Speaking to the windows specifically, I'll just be candid and transparent with this group. We have had that conversation both internally as staff and even at the council level, and frankly feel like the exposure to potentially helping every business that experiences that is so large that, I'm not sure this committee would want to see a dollar figure coming out of PSVS for that purpose, because it would be very high, is our estimates. And so we've grappled with it. We have said, should we help? Because we know that's like one of the number one issues. And we've continued to land on, we don't have a way that we think is economical and reasonable to put our arms around it. But I wrote down your suggestion, which I really like, is the economies of scale that the city could bring to bear by, having a much larger contract that might help us get the price point down and get the facilitation and coordination of replacements being much faster, even if it is at the cost of the business. We could potentially play a role in helping use our, buying power to at least get that lower and faster. I like that idea, and so we'll pursue that as staff, but we haven't identified really a way to fund that in a way that we think is responsible in balancing the main and competing interests yet. It's a tough one.
Yeah. And I would commend the
Thank you.
city on graffiti removal. I mean, like the graffiti removal component of Public Works is incredibly effective. If there's a way to model it after that, that might be an interesting opportunity. I mean, we've had graffiti on the Chamber building in Bakersfield, and sometimes we've shown up to work and they're already on it. They've already remediated it without a call, and so that level of service is very much appreciated.
And my question was more in first responding, such as boarding up, not necessarily in replacing.
Okay.
And Committee Member Matland has another question.
Comment. I think I love your bringing up small business, because when you talk about funding, small business is so afraid of filling out any documents, thinking you're never going to get it anyway. And by the time you do, large business has already grabbed up the money. And it happens time and time again. And funneling that to small business for window protection, but get it to the small businesses that need it. The Targets and Walmarts and larger volume grocers or small grocer associations have the ability to fix their own problems, but that money, needs to get to police, fire, and actually small business. For that kind of money, there's a lot of buying power. For window protection, are you going to get your visibility? No, but your windows are going to be protected. When you're open, you're open. But I love the idea.
Vice Chair Campbell.
I know you just told us that there would be sticker shock if you gave us a number. Is there some data set that the city keeps to tally the costs of homelessness?
Not Vice Chair, good question. We don't have one comprehensive number. We do look at our own budget. That number we're tracking regularly. We've done some sort of point in time spot counts of like what is the full cost of an encampment removal, or how much have we, what are our tipping fees at the landfill for all the things we've collected, from encampments. But we have not actually created an assessment of what is the full cost of homelessness impacts to the community. We haven't done that. That's not a bad idea.
I think we just have one more item, right? Clean City Teams on this overall
actually,
subject.
sorry, that there's the family reunification. I didn't hit that item, so yeah. So let me hit those two quickly. Family reunification is individuals who may not be from Bakersfield or Kern, who are experiencing homelessness. We'll help them get home, and sometimes they may have even been here for, let's say, 6 months or 12 months, but their family support network is somewhere else, or they're originally from another area. It's much better for them if they have somewhere that they have folks who can help them in their support network. And then also, we know there are many folks in the Bakersfield-Kern family that we need to help find solutions for and take care of. But we had an experience recently where somebody had reported that he was in Oakland, and they said, "Sure, I've got a cousin in Bakersfield," and they helped him get down to Bakersfield, and we'll help him get back to Oakland. So This is really just one, when you think about homelessness being the number one issue, we can't leave any potential program off the table. And we know this is a small percentage of the homeless population, but we want to continue to reunify them with their support networks. And that frees up some beds for folks that are here in our community.
So, Committee Member Coleman, and then Committee Member Abernathy.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. I appreciate it. First of all, thank you very much for including this project. I think it was a very difficult thing to talk about because, you know, it's a here's some money, go away kind of approach. But I think this needs to be included in one of the elements that we have to deal with homelessness. Because we are going to have situations where, you know, you track down a fellow's family and they're in Ohio somewhere and we didn't know Uncle Bob was over there in California. Yeah, send him home, we'll take care of him. And those are good solutions. My concern here is that I see a lot of buzzwords in what you wrote under this item that indicate recurring costs and a structure to this that may be more than the $300,000 that you're talking about actually using to give to people. And so my question was, is there a way that we can do this without creating a staff of people that work for the city operating that? Can we partner with some of the agencies we're already partnered with, Flood Ministries and the other ones? I don't want to single them out, but so that we don't build a bureaucracy behind this.
Great question, and a reminder to me that I missed some parts because we're not proposing city staff for this. We would definitely want to contract this out. There are folks that already do this work. We did a pilot with Flood Ministries at a much smaller amount, and they were able to do, I think, close to 20 reunifications over this last year. And so, and also, we assume there's going to be some ongoing need for this, but it may not be at this same level, let's say, you know, a year or 2 years from now. But we feel like there's enough of inflow of the population currently. We want to hit this hard, but it will be by contract. It will be with a community partner, and we're going to reevaluate in 1 to 2 years of, you know, do we need the same number of bodies to do this work? But as the pilot taught us a couple things, Flood was really doing this sort of as an ancillary on top of their many other duties. And we identified that if we had, you know, 2 dedicated teams that this is all they do, we're going to get a lot more folks back, you know, to where they need to be. And so that was the intent and building off of that pilot, but by contract and not creating a bureaucracy or frankly, you know, the same kind of benefits pension obligation on the city side.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. I have no more questions.
Committee Member
So
Abernathy?
when you give funding to a nonprofit, how do you judge the product other than them saying we sent 12 to Philadelphia? How do you really monitor it? Because I don't know Fred Schwartz, and they could say Fred Schwartz went to Minneapolis. Maybe he got partway there. How do you monitor that really seriously?
Yeah, good question. We have a couple of contracts in place right now with homeless service providers, and actually now the Housing and Homeless Ad Hoc Committee gets a monthly report in their monthly meetings on the metrics that are being provided by these homelessness support services agencies. And in our contracts, we require reporting that feeds into those reports. As far as, like, you know, the names of individuals and who really were they, and did we send the right people away, or did we really send someone away? The HMIS system, which fails me what HMIS stands for right now, but it's a by person name list of individuals who are accessing the homeless services network. And so we closely monitor that. Now the city does, although historically we were less involved, but we closely monitor that now that we're much more engaged in the homeless service area, because we're all dealing with the same clients between, you know, the different navigation centers and the different service providers. And so we can go back and verify, is that somebody who was in the HMIS system? You know, what was the data and background behind them? And Flood provides us that information for each of the reports of individuals that have been relocated. And so we have good reporting tools that we can include in our contract for services for these dollars.
Vice Chair Campbell?
This may be a little anecdotal, but I do have extensive experience with people that are charged with crimes as a criminal defense lawyer and interacting with police officers. And the information that I'm provided from police officers that I know is that the vast majority of people who are offered homeless services decline those services. And so my question kind of piggybacks on the question of my colleague here. You know, we're creating, it may not be a direct bureaucracy of city employees who are entitled to all the benefits that come with that, but these are people who will be coming back next year seeking another grant and will have every incentive to put the information in their application about how many people they helped. And the data source that you just cited was the database of people who have accepted homeless services, which is, from the information I have, a very small percentage of people who are eligible for them or to whom they're offered. So my concern is, if, let's say, they help 20 people over the course of a year, that's $15,000 per homeless person that's been helped. Is there not a more efficient way, perhaps, when a police officer encounters a homeless person and offers them homeless services and they decline and they say, well, you know, the city's offering a $15,000 grant for you to move to another state. We might have a long line of people out here looking for that money. So that might be a more efficient way, a more effective way. So is this, I guess the point of all this, my question is this really the most efficient way to do this? And to add to that, having experience working for nonprofits that subsisted on grants, this, I think it was Ronald Reagan who once said that the closest thing in this world to eternal life is a government program. I'd say the second closest thing is a nonprofit that depends on government grants. And so my concern is that this is not just a one-time experiment, but this is where we're dipping our toe in, but we're going to be submerged and it'll be permanent. And with the annual increases that come along with a permanent program.
I think good points and good questions. So a couple thoughts. One, we've looked at a number of different places that have done reunification programs, and so this is modeled off of best practices that have been learned and adjusted from other cities that and counties that have done the same thing. I think again, and to put into context, we do ask our flood outreach teams to track those that are service resistant or those who are willing to accept services. And I would say roughly a year ago, we started tracking that, and we were seeing somewhere around about a third of people saying, no thanks, I don't want services even if they're available. And that's now more than 50%. I believe we're at close to 59% of individuals that our outreach folks contact say, no, I don't want to go to a shelter. I don't want to go take services. And so we're paying close attention to that number, both to help us understand the problem as well as advocate around the homelessness issue. Again, I would suggest that this is really in the bucket of we don't want to leave any tool off the table for issue number one. As we make progress on the issue of homelessness and hopefully get more of a handle on the inflow, although we're fighting with the state all the time about what's causing the inflow of homelessness. But in the meantime, we feel like we can't leave any solution off the table, and that there may be other programs that get at an individual who says, I don't want any services. Well, maybe there are some other accountability programs that can help create much more of an incentive to go into a diversionary, let's say drug treatment or mental health treatment program, so that they don't have to have other consequences. So we're pursuing those ideas as well, but this is one program that will also help us, again, just reduce the numbers in any way that we can.
Committee Member Matland.
Are we able to see your best practices? I'd love to see what your bullet points on the best practices that other cities have tried.
We can share that.
That would be just
we could share that.
insightful.
Sure, yeah. And in fact, Yeah, we could do that on this topic as well as just our, all the gaps that we're trying to fill in the system. We've done some analysis on that too. Okay, I'll move to the Clean City Teams software system purchase. So we have, we have, we're going from 8 teams to now 11 teams that are out in the city picking up trash, debris all the time. A few of the, I think one team is dedicated to bulky waste items like fridges and couches that are much larger. And then this is labeled in particular around Clean City Teams, but we also have our rapid response teams. We have our flood ministry teams. We have many teams that are out responding to homelessness, something that we've learned over the last couple of years. As we've added all these teams, because we started out with 2 rapid response teams and 1 impact team. We're up to getting close to 3 impact teams, 4 rapid response teams, 11 Clean City teams. We continue to get at this #1 issue of homelessness, but we're finding it's a significant challenge. But we also want to be as efficient and effective as possible with those resources. And so I was asking our teams, do we need to add more Clean City teams? And the feedback was, hold up, boss, don't add another team. We think we can get more for what we're already investing. And if we're a little more efficient in how we deploy these teams, then we can get more work out of them. And so what happens right now is we have some static ways of assigning out the work, meaning we get lots of requests from the community, phone calls, emails, mobile app responses saying there's an encampment here, an encampment there, there's a mess here, there's a mess there. And then we create lists for our teams and we say, okay, well, rapid response team 1, you're going to go and hit these 8 spots today. But the park rangers are looking at the mobile app and they're saying, oh, there's an encampment in this park, and the rapid response team, maybe they've been assigned the same thing. There is a software system out there that can allow us almost real-time deployment or dispatching of these teams so that as soon as an issue has been addressed, they can take that off the list and then nobody's going to now respond to that. But right now we're finding sometimes we have a team that's going and they're spending 15, 20 minutes responding to a location that's already been addressed. Hey, we need those 15, 20 minutes for every next, encampment or issue to be addressed. Also, we're finding that sometimes one of our teams is waiting for another team to come, and maybe our police impact team, or excuse me, our rapid response team is waiting for our police impact team to come address a tough issue, or our police impact team is waiting for rapid response to come and collect some of those materials so that they can take them away. This will offer us an opportunity to be much more efficient in how we deploy those teams so we get the maximum impact from their service. So,
Vice Chair Campbell?
Yeah.
Is this a software license that's being purchased by the city, or is there an annual subscription cost?
This is a subscription cost, so this would be an ongoing cost.
Okay. Is there currently a system that's akin to the police dispatch system for these teams to coordinate?
There isn't today, and what we're proposing to use is actually built off of the Esri. You may have heard of Esri GIS system. This is actually using a module for a system that we currently have instead of going and getting a whole new system. This is just getting this module within this system that it does create some economies and some cost savings rather than reinventing the wheel, but we need more licenses for this specific module within a system that we have.
How many total city employees are contemplated in using this software?
It looks like about 40 employees. Okay.
All right. We have a question from Committee Member Matland.
$150,000 a year for the software?
Correct.
This is going to be a personal issue for me, but the allocation and some of these programs, the cleanup, the park ranger, the things that fall underneath this, there's with funding and government funding and city funding, all this, it would be great. It is so hard to start a small business nowadays. You don't have the money to buy one. You can't start one because of regulations and overhead. but this would be a great thing for minority funding projects to private, we've got to start creating new minority business in this country for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. And actually, when I first arrived in Bakersfield, I was looking at our technology ecosystem and our innovation ecosystem, and frankly, they were both weak. And so I was at a lunch with Ryan Alsop, Chief Administrative Officer of the county, and he was lamenting some of the same, saying, how do we, solve some of our problems, but also, we don't think we need to just hire 4 or 5 city or county employees to solve that problem. And he said, we got to just do a public-private partnership, city and the county and somebody else. And I said, why not? Why not? And so it's not under the purview of today's, but just in response to your comment, this oversight committee has already approved in the past dollars to fund what we're calling the innovation lab with Bitwise. And so the city and the county are going in to fund an innovation lab with Bitwise to raise up tech entrepreneurs. And the first cohort was we allowed folks to propose their own ideas. And we have 8 new small businesses in this community because of this innovation lab. But future cohorts, we've said, we want to be able to bring city and county challenges and say, can somebody create some startup that solves our problem without us trying to create some government, solution to it? Could it be a private solution that also creates new business and sort of solves this challenge and this problem? And so we've been doing just what you suggested through the Innovation Lab, and look forward to future projects that come out of that group. That's we hope more creative and innovative than just the city trying to come up with our own solution. Probably takes a lot longer too.
Well, I love that. We have that great tech school here in town now. And, to create and start a business, you've got to be able to do it.
Yeah, and I think
ground sourcing.
Yep,
So
yeah, the help in planning and sort of the technical assistance, as well as a little bit of the seed money to help them get going. That's all part of the Innovation Lab. So I'll keep moving us through. I was going to offer up one thing, Chair. Go ahead.
Yes, we've got a question from Vice Chair Campbell.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should have asked this before, but just to clarify, this is actually the cost of acquiring the license for the software. It's not just a cost of a study of its feasibility. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, 'cause the paragraph here was, it's actually impressive how much jargon was fit into one paragraph, but it wasn't exactly clear
Yeah.
to me, but thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to make sure that's.
This is to implement. I believe this is just, no, I believe, this is a 1-year cost. We actually haven't signed a contract yet until the funding would be available. We typically do a 2 or 3 year contract, but we only, we allocate the funds, on an annual basis. And so this is the first year cost for those subscriptions.
Yes. Committee Member Coleman.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. I'm glad you clarified that this is a module. I was a little worried that, because we just spent $25 million upgrading your whole computer system here, and then you're looking for another $150,000 for this thing. So this is something that will interface with our newly acquired computer systems.
Actually, it will interface, yes. I want to be clear to your question. This is not a module of the new financial software system, but it is, so typically you'll have your core financial software system and then a number of systems that tie to it. So this will tie into a system that will interface with our new system, yes. Esri is not our core financial system, but it will have key interfaces, to our system. But it is absolutely leveraging an existing a core software program that we have. And to that point, a lot more of the data that we can actually share out and report out on, and also maps that we can visualize. That's part of why we wanted to use that existing system that we have, is because it has the same type of data already in it that we can overlay maps of, do our encampment overlays look similar to some of our other overlays? There's a lot going to be good shared data that comes out of this one system.
You refer to it as a financial platform, but I thought it was an enterprise system.
It is, you're right. It is an enterprise system. That's my shortcut I use because lots of folks don't know what the ERP necessarily is, but it is a full enterprise system.
Okay, so that takes care of all the city's needs, is based in that one enterprise system, and then you just try to find components additional components that you discover in the future will somehow interface with those?
I would say largely yes. There's one exception, again, just wanting to be fully transparent. There's work management systems that typically, like Public Works and a large utility, those work management systems aren't typically part of the enterprise, but otherwise our ERP is, it covers most everything. We'll have some other best of breed type softwares for work management. We've got an existing HR interface for doing job recruitments that's going to just be the same. But yes, I think to answer your question, this ERP covers our most core needs.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. I have no further questions.
Thank you. And then, City Manager, you were going to make a suggestion on moving forward.
I was, and I don't want us to break too much, but we actually do have lunches available for folks, and the body could determine, hey, let's wrap up and take our lunches with us, or if you want to take a quick break and folks can bring their lunches back to the dais, it's your call.
I think the consensus is let's keep going.
We'll keep moving.
Yeah.
So this
We're worried about how we look on, or at least I am worried about how I look on KGov. So
fair enough. So this item is separate from. I mentioned a reserve policy earlier that where we have one-time revenues that we take 25% of that and automatically put it into reserves. This is separate from that we have a policy that we should always have 2 months of working cash on reserve. That is the national standard, the Government Finance Officers Association best practice standard for how much working cash governments should have on hand. Just for some perspective, I was sharing this with council recently, there's actually very few cities in California that meet this standard, and amongst large cities, there's only 2 other cities that meet this standard. It is a reasonable standard, but many local governments find it hard to forego other projects and funding to set aside reserves, and so Public Safety Vital Services tax has been fundamental in repairing our fiscal health and our ability to be fiscally solvent into the future. So as the revenues increase and the budget slightly increases over time, to keep up with that 2 months, there's slight increases. So this $1.6 million is the amount that's needed to get us back up to 2 months, because we were at 2 months a year ago, but the budget increased slightly, so we need another 1.6 to just stay at 2 months. That's what this is about. And then I'll shift into our last category, and that is quality of life. And so 3 quick actions here. One related to animal services. We continue to see challenges with our operations at the animal shelter. It's been a concern that's been raised at many recent city council meetings. And some of that is just the rising cost of medications and treatments. And so our contract with the SPCA to manage that facility has been insufficient. And so typically this would be an annual increase, but we've found that we're insufficient enough that there is a mid-year need there, as well as we wanted to allocate a few dollars to help speed up some capital improvement projects there that are going to actually create some greater efficiencies. If they're able to make some adjustments within the footprint of the shelter, they'll be able to hold more animals, process more animals in a timely manner. The park amenities and renovation improvements is a new program that we started this year. We've been able to make significant progress in capital updates to our parks throughout the city. We had a lot of deferred maintenance that we've been catching up on. But there are many smaller projects that are, we need to put in a couple new benches, or a bathroom has been vandalized and we need to go in and fix up that bathroom. This year also, as our park rangers have started, we've noticed that there's the ability to close some of those internal parking lots in our parks, but there's not a gate. And so we used some of this Perry funding. There was an allocation approved in the budget this last year to do $500,000 worth of work under this fund in parks to put gates up at many of our local parks, parking lots, to be able to make sure people leave when park time is to close, and then it's closed during the night. The Parks Department has found that the needs and the experience in addressing some of these smaller issues has been, greater than what was budgeted. And we feel like there's been really good impacts to these small improvements throughout our parks, as well as just some of the ongoing maintenance challenges we have in our parks, and that this additional funding would allow us to get at more of those park amenities and renovation small items that aren't a big $1 million or $500,000 improvement to the park. And so that budget has largely been expended already this year, and we think there's really good projects to do throughout the rest of the fiscal year from this funding. And then the last item on this list is a recent a discussion that was actually an adjustment made after we presented this preliminary information to the City Council, that we have what's called a habitat conservation plan that allows developers to streamline their projects, that was an asset to the community historically, but the costs of maintaining that program have increased significantly. And so there's been some conversation at the county board of supervisors and city council level of, do we really continue that program or not? Without that program, there could be significant costs for compliance under the Endangered Species Act. And so it was proposed by council, rather than immediately move forward in renewing this other program that would have a high cost to development fees, that we set aside some funds to help developers address mitigation under the Endangered Species Act, to help projects move forward and make sure that that mitigation occurs without there being major impacts to the ability to develop those projects. And so this was a council recommended a line item to support economic development and some of the impacts that may come for mitigation requirements.
On that one, what do you think is going to be the split between what's going to be available to incent development and then what maybe the city will need for its own compliance purposes?
This would all be
private sector.
Private sector assistance. The other city compliance needs, we've to date determined we can do those in-house within existing resources. This would be specifically to support projects.
I mean, the HCP is the reason that we're one of the communities that still actually builds production housing, so it's incredibly important. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. Of all the items on this list, this last one here, the support for the Endangered Species Act compliance, seems to be the most tenuously connected to the objectives of this particular sales tax. Could you explain to me how this is under the umbrella of the purpose of this fund?
Yeah, we feel like it's consistent with the priority around economic development and facilitating greater economic development.
All right.
I think Committee Member Matlin was first, and then Committee Member Coleman.
I do think some of these programs are great. I'll probably use terrible analogies, but some of these things could be privately, locally funded. The animal shelter, I think, is one. You see how many companies in town and the politicians do adoptions, fundraising. I mean, if I was on the street corner with a dog that was skinny and there was a homeless guy next to me, I could get $5 to help the dog and $1 for the guy. I mean, it's just the it's a COVID thing. Everybody now has an animal and they love it. And I just think some of these things, and where's the the money for the police and fire? I mean, that's my biggest thing that I thought the tax was on number one, and I see very little of it.
Yeah, I'll take that last question first. And again, this is a
That wasn't a question.
Oh, okay. This is a mid-year allocation, and so, you know, if you look at the percent of the budget that's, you know, supporting public safety across the board for PSVS, it's, you know, it's by and large public safety. But mid-year, typically the things that have emerged that we didn't necessarily see back last, you know, May and June, that would be needs, and that have emerged as more imminent issues in advance of the next, you know, budget process. And so, you know, we've made a lot of police and fire investments in the regular budget, and don't see immediate needs to increase those. Whereas, in particular around homelessness, we just said, you know, we've made a lot of investments, but we need to make even more to continue to make more impacts around homelessness. That's why you see the large, you know, emphasis on homelessness in this proposal. Some of these other topics, like the police training facility, we've typically looked to pay back that amount as we've had one-time monies instead of regular budgets. And then also, this last slide, these are things that have just emerged since the regular budgeting process as needs, and that's why we see those here versus the regular process. You will see a lot more police, and I think probably even parks and economic development in the next budget cycle. You'll see you know, those items be much more represented in the regular budget process.
Well, the tax increase wasn't set up for parks and other projects. I mean, as far as anyone I've talked to who voted, it was for police and fire. Obviously, we have a crime problem. There's a homeless problem, yes. But you know, we need more officers, period.
Agreed. It's not a money question, that though. The monies were set aside, and we're working to spend that as much as we can.
Well, we're way off track of how the vote was presented, is my point. And I think these are, you know, a lot of these are great programs. But that was not what the ballot was.
Again, I'll take that as good feedback of what the priorities are. Again, how we're measuring this is what were the 13 priorities that were, you know, listed out there, which, you know, I think, you know, 7 out of the 13 were police, and another one was, or 1 or 2 were fire. I'm just going off the top of my head. But then there were others that did speak to economic development, quality of life, and these types of issues. And I think the percentage of investments are reflected to the number of priorities, you know, related to those areas of emphasis.
And then I have another question. In regards to some of these things, you know, do we have access to the bids and how you came up with the budget? You know what I mean? You must have had some bids and quotes on different things.
We typically don't have bids and quotes at the budgeting level. We have estimates that are often
quote.
Yeah, they're often informed by previous expenditures or bids or quotes we've been able to see from other cities that have done similar things. And we can provide some of the information that was background or context for creating those estimates, but we typically don't have bids at the budgeting level until the fund's there, and then we go solicit the bids.
Then do you get more than one estimate?
Absolutely. We have procurement, you know, policies that require competitive bidding processes that usually the limit is at least three bids at the lowest expenditure level. And for our larger expenditures, we have to go through more, you know, in-depth processes like a request for proposals or a low bid process.
All right, thank you. Because some of the, you know, things that were on last year, after doing more research, the numbers were extremely high for the product or project that was quoted. So That's why I'd like to, if possible, see estimates and quotes or bids, however you want to call them. Thank you.
We'll keep that in mind.
Committee Member Coleman.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. I appreciate it. Mr. Clegg, we kind of skimmed over the Economic and Community Development Department section regarding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund allocation. We just mentioned it briefly and went on to the next item. I think originally we weren't clear on how we were going to ask questions about these things. In the past, we've done it differently. So I want to go back to this item at $2.9 million. Part of this is a matching kind of situation where we put money in, the state puts money in. The question becomes, where does that money go? And how does that hit the streets? I'm involved with the Planning Commission, and one of our biggest issues right now is RENA and how we meet our RENA numbers. And it looks like with some cajoling, we can probably meet our RENA numbers on market rate housing, if we're lucky. But we're going to fall far short, like a lot of communities in California, on the moderate income and low income housing. So how does this money actually hit the street to help with that?
Yeah, great question. And Chris Boyle will be just elated to hear RENA come up in this conversation. These funds have, and we've had 3 cycles now of PSVS funding going towards Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And in each cycle, we've created a notice of funding availability, and we solicit for affordable housing projects. What I would suggest beyond that, that's the shortest answer. We're in the process, and largely through the work of an affordable housing strategy and the Housing and Homelessness Ad Hoc, well, it's now a standing Housing and Homelessness Committee, looking at how do we create really a whole menu of options to create more affordable housing and even market rate, but lower income, more affordable market rate housing. How do we just create many more units across the board? Because frankly, just building these larger multifamily projects is not going to cut it. We need to do many other types like infill projects and accessory dwelling units and duplex triplexes, as well as just smaller lot, smaller square foot home, and even homeowner or a single family for rent that are smaller. And the days of the starter home went away a long time ago, but that's part of the answer of really addressing affordable housing is at the market rate, getting at that as well. And so these funds, again, have historically gone out through notice of funding availability for people just to propose projects, and we have a set of scoring criteria that we score all those projects on, and it's taken to the Budget, Finance, and Economic Development Committee historically to review those proposals. We may shift that now to the Housing and Homelessness Committee for review. And then ultimately the City Council, votes on each one of those projects to fund them after they come out of that scoring process. But the reason for me to say that whole menu of projects is that we're looking at using this next cycle specifically of this Affordable Housing Trust Fund to have some funds set aside to not just be for any project, but a certain amount of the funding to try and encourage more infill development and more accessory dwelling unit development, and not just build those big multi-unit projects. We're going to still have some money for those. We need those units, but we're going to set some funds aside for these other types of housing development. But there will be a competitive public process to compete for those funds.
Hello. You said this is the 3rd cycle of this, or the 2nd cycle?
This is actually going to, we've had 3 cycles. This will actually, because of this is coming as a match to some state monies, it's going to be almost like 3.5, and then next year would be the 4th cycle. This is kind of like 3.5.
So basically, we've had $15 million in money come into this program so far. Has $15 million gone out into, or is the goal to collect a bunch of money and allow it to earn some returns and then use that return to What is the real goal there?
Our goal is really to get the money out as quickly as possible, just because the need is so acute. Although the money can sit there and earn some interest, because some of these projects take a little while to get out there. But that's a good idea. No, the goal is to get it out as quickly as possible. And actually, because we've had some other state matches to that same fund. It's I think the number is $16.7 million has been allocated fully into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. A majority of that money has been allocated, meaning it's been designated to specific projects. The first 2 cycles, that money's out the door. This third cycle, some projects have been identified, and we've said, hey, we're going to fund that project at that amount, but we're still working out the details of the project, and so the money hasn't gone out the door yet, but it's been determined for a specific project. And from those funds, just again, for some perspective, these projects cost a lot of money. Unfortunately, affordable housing is not very affordable, and that's a dilemma we're facing at the state level, and we're not in total control of that. But typically, our money is part of a broader funding package they have to put together with tax credits and other funding sources to make these projects work. And so our $16 million has gone to leverage projects that total $100 million. And right now, there are 900 affordable housing units in planning or production from these funding sources. Now, that's still, if you do the math, that's an expensive per unit cost. But that is, frankly, been our reality around affordable housing. And again, council's taking a hard look at, are there ways that we can pull levers to reduce some of the cost line items for affordable housing in the city? We're going to try. But most of how these projects come together, that's what it's taking right now to build affordable housing in California and meet all of the requirements for how they have to be built.
I have one final question. This is on the finance department, the $1.6 million in the rainy day fund. And, I'm always glad when I can see that we're, putting some money aside to, for future things. And I think that was one of the measure and priorities. My question is that once we allocate $1.6 million to this rainy day fund, does the PSVS rules no longer apply to that money? So is council free to spend that when and how they want?
They're not. It hasn't happened yet, so we haven't tested that. But the way that we've interpreted that as staff is, the same rules apply to spend that money when it comes out of the rainy day fund and takes council approval, would have to go through oversight committee. Would it would be used, I guess the use would be under the same set of rules.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Committee Member Abernathy.
Okay, well, I think we owe a big thank you to inflation, which is why we have this money. The consumers are paying more for everything. And now we're spending it. And, that's such a serious problem in society today, because the same people you're trying to help are paying more for everything. And then we raise the sales tax on them. So I'm, pretty concerned about some of these projects. Of course, my overall is I don't see a dime for improving the streets in this town. And I know you have a budget there for it, but it seems like when I saw that initiative and the voters faced it, it was to, to improve the economy, to get business in here and all these things. And we have really crummy street maintenance in this town, or repaving, not just maintenance, but repaving. So I'm still concerned why that's never part of our discussions here. But last time I was told we're filling a pothole at the homeless shelter, and that I haven't come down from that much, because I just can't see why we're focused like that. But I don't think anyone supporting the sales tax increase was thinking we're going to have a bigger cat playground there, kennel space. This looks like you had $500,000 was set aside, and that the city then hired a consultant who came up with a plan that we should have a bigger cat playground and kennel space. And that's real money, and I just don't see how this fits in when we aren't doing the other. To the issue of the bathrooms, I know, and the story in the paper today, they're destroyed by people going in there and doing it, whether it's the homeless or I bet it's a lot of 19-year-old sons of people that people in this room even know is going on. So what are we going to do? Just keep repairing them? Or when you talked about a gate, well, that means you're driving to the park, but the people destroying it, why not just lock these bathrooms from 10 p.m. to 7, 8 a.m. with a kind of lock that they can't bust, because I heard that's what they just did. So with these park rangers, the other thing I wanted to know is, and I know we're supposed to be talking just about this, but are they counting how many people they see in the park, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. versus 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. to warrant, for what's going on? So we have an idea how this money, if it's really getting us to where we need to go. So that's just a few of them, but I can't see that raising the sales tax was to enlarge the cat playground there. So that's just one. I'm sorry to repeat that one, but.
Yeah, so just a couple follow-ups from that. The park rangers are not doing visitor counts in our parks, but they are tracking a number of other metrics. They're tracking how many contacts they have, how many encampments that they address, how many individuals that they interact with. We have had park rangers issue some citations at this point, and also give some warnings to folks who are holding unauthorized events, which, that's not as high on the priority as some of the safety and vandalism and homelessness, but we're counting all those different things. And we have had some very good reports about from the community. In fact, the number of positive feedback that we've received unsolicited about the perception of safety in the parks, and they want to go back to the parks because of the rangers has been very positive. But we also are looking at several metrics that the park rangers are measuring, and we'll include those in our annual reports on the PSVS. As to streets, anticipate a large proposal on streets in the coming budget cycle, because we have noticed that our teams have the capacity to do more streets work, and I think we can put more budget towards that next year. We haven't actually used PSVS much in the first few years. It was largely on reserves and police and fire and economic development and homelessness and parks. But I think we'll see some streets allocations in this coming budget as we've been able to kind of tackle some of those other pressing needs. And then just, I would just, to some of the other points to draw the nexus around homelessness, I think in a more ideal scenario, would we have the ability to say, you have to take services under the conditions that we determine? We might like that, but under some of the federal case law and state policies, and even under some of our own, measures of, what's effective, we're trying to create both a carrot and a stick approach. And we're working on some of the stick side of things with the county and our criminal justice system, and we're pushing on the state. But on the carrot side, if there's folks who won't go to a shelter because they're not going to leave their animal behind, we wanted to solve for that. And, we're not going to let that be a barrier to get somebody into a shelter who's willing to go to a shelter. And so, we've made some of those investments, but we are always conscious of the public dollar and how to get the best and return on value for that dollar. But making, some of those investments we think that will have good impacts in the programs that ultimately impact our residents and citizens.
So I don't want to shut down discussion, but I do want to be mindful of time. I know I do have a hard stop at 2, and I know we do have some requests for action. So I mean, unless there are very much burning questions or comments, and I will get to you, if we could start the process of working through some of these, I think that would be helpful to all of us. So I'll go to Committee Member Matland and then to Committee Vice Chair Campbell.
Are you anticipating we're supposed to vote today on this?
Yes.
Isn't that the request from staff?
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to have a couple meetings.
No, because this is just the mid-year, and there is a requirement that we get this before the City Council by...
Well, we were hoping to take it to council tomorrow. We had rescheduled one meeting and then rescheduled a second meeting. And I think, frankly, again, we only have these 9 items in front of the committee. And I think we've heard good debate, but I think we can ask for, committee action on these 9 items.
Committee Member Matland.
I'm just not, I'm absolutely not okay with that. I don't know how anyone else feels. But my one comment was on roads is when we build these roads, new roads, at what point is the contractor responsible for the road is bad in 12 months? But we can answer that another time, but I really think voting on this, because we've been sitting here for an hour and a half, is a little lack on conversation and debate. Not debate, but conversation. And that's the way I feel.
And I'll take direction from the committee. What I would suggest again is consider, what might be the additional dialogue. I'm not sure what the additional dialogue would be. The role of the committee is to determine if these are consistent with the 13 priorities. And again, I appreciate the feedback, and there's good dialogue happening, and I've taken a lot of good notes, and it's helped us be thoughtful about how we implement, but respectfully, the role of the committee is not in precisely how to implement these programs or the exact amount that's the right amount for these programs. It's really to determine if these are consistent with the priorities. And then, it's the role of the council and staff to, determine how to best implement. But again, good feedback, and we'll take it into account. But I feel like there's enough information here to determine if this is consistent with the 13 priorities established under the measure.
Well, the previous meetings that were canceled, were we going to vote that day on those?
We anticipated having 2 meetings, so we thought we could have one intro and the second meeting. But then, as I have been in communication with folks because we missed meetings, I tried to communicate that we were looking to fit it all into this one meeting.
But we were going to have 3 meetings.
We were going to have 2.
Number one, 2 or 4 hours, 2 meetings. And we cracked through this in an hour and a half.
We sometimes do the best we can.
I think we can do better. That,
I mean, I'll look to my colleagues. It requires all of us to take action and it requires you all to make motions. I mean, how we've handled this in the past is we have taken these one by one and voted on them. Folks are free to cast their vote in terms of whether or not it aligns, and then also provide some comments that get reflected in the transmission to the city council when they make their determination when it's put before them. But I would encourage us to follow that process now. I think we've had a lot of good discussion and debate, and this is a fairly light list given the history of PSVS. So if we could have the slides.
And so what I was going to propose, Chair, typically we've taken them in buckets by slide, and so this is the first slide for consideration that's on the screen.
Is there to my colleagues for any motions?
I'll make a motion to vote on it.
Second.
Okay. That we say this is consistent? Okay. There is a motion by Committee Member Abernathy, second by Committee Member Dewey, that this department training facility is consistent with PSVS. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
Aye.
Committee Member Madlin. Aye. Committee Member Dewey. Aye. Committee Member Coman.
Aye, I'm sorry.
Committee Member Abernathy.
Aye.
Committee Member Rojas Mora.
Aye.
And Committee Member Prince.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent.
And historically, again, we've taken some things as a package. If folks want to pull things out, they can, but this homelessness package is up on the screen is the next one for consideration.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion in regards to City Council Goal number 2, addressing the homelessness, that this proposal actually is consistent with PSVS and file a motion to accept.
All right, we have a motion from Committee Member Prince. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Committee Member Rojas Mora. Any discussion?
I would move to amend the motion to vote on each item, sub-item individually.
Okay.
I'd second that.
Okay. So we have to vote on that amendment on whether or not to take them individually. Is that correct, Mr. City Attorney?
That is correct.
All
So
right.
the motion would be is to take it individually.
Okay. All right. Madam Clerk, we have motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
No.
Vice Chair Campbell,
Yes.
Committee Member Madlin. Yes. Committee Member Dewey,
No.
Committee Member Coman,
Yes.
Committee Member Abernathy,
Yes.
Committee Member Rojas Mora,
No.
Committee Member Prince.
No.
Is it tie?
We have a tie with Committee Members Dewey, Chair Ortiz.
Motion fails because it fails to reach a majority?
Correct.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor again from Mr. Prince, seconded by Committee Member Rojas Mora, that the 4.4 million is consistent with PSVS. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Well, a point of order, I think this motion needs to be discussed, or at least offered for discussion before
Sure.
there's a vote. So I would comment on this. The reason I moved to amend the motion was that I do believe that some of this subject matter is consistent and some of it is not. And so as a consequence of the committee voting down my amendment, I'm going to have to cast a no vote for this entire motion. Specifically with respect to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, it appears to me that it is an extremely inefficient use of government resources to spend millions of dollars for a handful of units based apparently on the premise that someone who's living under a bridge with a maybe stolen grocery cart and maybe not because of squatters' rights, I guess, to grocery carts, that the only reason he's living there is that he can't afford the available housing in the city of Bakersfield. I just absolutely reject that premise. There are all kinds of other causes of homelessness, and the affordability of the housing is not it. I just reject that premise. There's no data to support that. And I'm not satisfied that this money is being spent in a way that would actually resolve any homelessness. I'm not convinced of that. There was insufficient information to support that. I do believe that the 1.1 million in private security services is consistent with the Measure N directives. The shopping cart containment subsidy program, this one is similar to the support for funding for Endangered Species Act compliance, in that what we have is we have a government mandated regulation that costs businesses money, and then as a result, we're taxing the rest of the public to subsidize the cost of that government regulation. And that seems completely backwards to me. It is conceivably within the scope, but it is we're picking and choosing, as Mr. Prince observed, which businesses receive the assistance of the government in the cost of compliance with government regulation and which ones don't get that assistance. So I don't think it's an appropriate use of the funds. With respect to the Family Reunification Initiative, I don't believe that's going to be effective in any way. I don't think that's consistent. What we're doing is we're setting up a new bureaucracy, a new set of dependents on city funds that will be perpetual. The final item, the Clean City Team software, despite my initial reservations based on the wording of this recommendation, I think that is consistent with the objectives of Measure N. But since these are all lumped together, and one drop of poison in a gallon of water makes the whole gallon of water undrinkable, I'm going to encourage my colleagues to cast a no vote on this measure.
And if I may, Chair, for a point of clarification, particularly for newer members, as was pointed out last year, the practice has been when there are dissenting votes that we invite those members to comment as to why, and that we include that for the record for the City Council for their reflection. And so thank you, Committee Member Campbell, for providing some of that feedback, because we'll just include that in the record for council consideration. But that's what we've typically done, is when there's been a no vote or a reservation, we just include that as a minority opinion for the record.
Well, it's not a minority opinion yet.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to jump
Okay.
into this discussion because one of our frustrations, my frustration, I don't say our, my frustrations is that there's really no opportunity for the members of this committee to have any dialogue about these issues. You know, we can ask you questions and we can offer opinions, but really don't ever have an opportunity as a committee to discuss philosophies and those kind of things. This is a good example because my vice chair points out the Affordable Housing Trust Fund contribution. And, you know, that raises the question to me, is that truly in line with Measure N? I'm not entirely certain now. So I would have been able to vote, you know, individually on these items, but I hadn't considered that because we've never really had an opportunity to discuss, you know, amongst ourselves, even in a public forum, to kind of, you know, to understand that kind of stuff. So, you know, I didn't know he was thinking that way, and when he thinks that way, I have to ask the question to myself, and then, you know, I'm sure other colleagues are going to have other opinions on certain issues, and if we never have an opportunity to discuss this kind of stuff, it makes it very difficult for us to have, you know, some kind of consensus and some kind of, and I know we're not supposed to all agree on things, but you know, I think it's important that we're able to share different perspectives on things. You know, we talked about, you know, we just kind of glossed over the whole 2 items on here that are related to animals and pets and those kind of things, and we're expected to gloss over that by throwing it in all one pile. So I'm not saying I'm not going to vote on this. I'm just saying that, you know, I think that at least going forward when we come to our annual meeting, because we had the same thing at the annual meeting when we set the budget for last year, is your staff presented, you know, department by department, they presented what they're proposing. And there really, other than our individual questions, there was never opportunity for the committee to discuss issues, render some thoughts and that kind of thing for other committee members to share. So I would like to see some revision of how we do that, if not today, certainly in the future. Thank you.
Committee Member Matland?
I'm not sure where to start. Well, I haven't been on boards and committees and all that, but I've never really had something that we had a discussion with that were all different line items, and that's an all or nothing deal. An all or nothing deal, and I just think there was some comment and maybe some ideas that were thrown out there on some opinion on some of the issues that validate individual, I mean, they're all separate line items. And none of them are really the same. And I just think it's short-sighted to just do the whole, I don't know how to explain it well, because this isn't something I do. But an all or nothing is, I just not used to dealing with issues like that without kind of going through them with some amount of discussion or forethought, or so that's my opinion on that.
Turning to my colleagues, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Do you want to repeat, what's this motion?
The motion is that the items on the screen, the 4.476 million, are consistent with PSVS. So Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
No.
Committee Member Madland,
No.
Committee Member Dewey. Aye. Committee Member Coman,
No.
Committee Member Abernathy,
No.
Committee Member Rojas Mora,
Aye.
Committee Member Prince.
Yes.
There is a tie. Motion fails.
Yep, so the motion fails, and that will be reflected when we present this to the city council.
Well, is this maybe an opportunity right at this point for any committee members to opine so that you get it right in the
Yeah.
notes?
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry.
Agreed. If there is any further discussion or anything that folks want noted in the correspondence to City Council when they take up this item, please.
Presumably, we can incorporate by reference all the comments previously made.
I would
and
assume so.
Nothing else to add, okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. If
Okay,
we could-
seeing no further comment, we'll go to the next item.
So the next item is the fiscal solvency. The contribution to the rainy day fund. I will turn to my colleagues for discussion before asking for a motion.
You know, I just want to say that in other committees I've been on, generally during this discussion when people are making presentations, there's a period of time where we're allowed only to ask questions, not to opine, all right? And then at the end of the process is an opportunity for the board members or committee members, whatever you call them, to then offer their opinions on various things. And I think that in the future, we should adopt that as if that's possible,
Yeah, it's
adopt that as a process because we learn from other people at the table. And it may sway us, it may not. It may embolden us or whatever, I don't know.
Completely agree, it's possible,
So
and
if we-
it's consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and for this one, you know, obviously, I'm a big fan of saving money. So, and my only reservation was addressed by the city manager, so I would be in favor of this.
I'll second that motion.
All right. We have a motion by Committee Member Coleman, a second by Vice Chair Campbell that this is consistent with PSVS. I will return to my colleagues for discussion on the motion before asking that we call the question. All right. Madam Clerk, please call the question.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
Aye.
Committee Member Madland, Committee Member Dewey. Committee Member Coman,
Aye.
Committee Member Abernathy,
Aye.
Committee Member Rojas Mora,
Yes.
and Committee Member Prince.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent.
Sorry, even though this was approved, any comments that people want included in the City Council transmission? All right. We've got strategic programs, so the total of 1 million, which includes the animal shelter, the parks and amenities, and renovation improvements, and then the ESA, the Endangered Species Act compliance. Discussion amongst my colleagues.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to separate these three items into separate votes, please.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Any discussion? All right. We have a motion by Committee Member Coleman and a second by Vice Chair Campbell to separate these into individual items. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
Aye.
Committee Member Madland,
Aye.
Committee Member Dewey. Committee Member Coman,
Aye.
Committee Member Abernathy,
Aye.
and Committee Member Rojas Mora,
Yes.
Committee Member Prince. Motion is approved with Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent.
Okay. So taking these one at a time, if it's agreeable, we can start with animal shelter operating and CIP projects. Discussion around that? Or motions?
I make a motion to approve the 300,000 for the animal shelter operating.
Okay. We've got a motion by Committee Member Dewey. Is there a second to approve or to say that it's consistent?
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
No.
Committee Member Madlin,
No.
Committee Member Dewey,
Yes.
Committee Member Andreessen's absent, Committee Member Coman,
No.
Committee Member Abernathy,
No.
Committee Member Rojas Mora.
Yes.
Motion fails with Committee Members Madlin, Campbell.
We missed one.
Yes.
City Clerk.
Oh, I missed one. Apologize. Committee Member Prince.
Yes, please.
Motion fails due to a tie.
I'll return to my colleagues. Anything anyone wants noted for the record?
So, wait a minute. So the motion to approve it failed.
Yes.
So I'd like to make a motion to, do we have to make a motion to deny it? If it's,
I don't think that we do. I think the
because
message
it's
is,
already just, it
Yeah, I
can't go
think-
forward anyway, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think-
All right, thank
I
you.
mean, we will still take it to the city council. The city council may choose to still appropriate these
Absolutely,
funds. but
absolutely. That's
they'll
within their
know-
authority to do, yeah.
They'll know, the feedback will be clear from the committee that it was not a majority saying consistent yes.
Thank you.
I would like the record, Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes,
Just
please.
for the record on this particular item, that I find that the animal shelter operating and the SIP projects does fall, in my opinion, under at least two of the spending priorities that's listed for PSVS. Thank you.
All right. We've got the park amenities and renovation improvements, $300,000 allocation. I'll look to my colleagues for any discussion. Any motions?
I would like to make a motion that the park amenities and renovation improvements move forward in regards to being a part of and in regards to the PSVS funds and qualify as such.
All right. We have a motion from Committee Member Prince. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion from Committee Member Prince, a second from Committee Member Rojas Mora. Any further discussion amongst my colleagues? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
No.
Committee Member Madlin,
Aye.
Committee Member Dewey. Committee Member Coman,
Aye.
Committee Member Abernathy,
No.
Committee Member Rojas Mora,
Yes.
and Committee Member Prince.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Campbell and Abernathy voting no, and Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent.
All right. Any items or any commentary that you want included in the transmission to council?
I have a brief comment.
Yeah.
I would just encourage the council to go back to the language that was put on the ballot in front of the voters, the language for Measure N, which passed by an eyelash, that said that the purpose of the funds was to prevent cuts/improve 911 emergency response, police/fire protection, anti-gang/drug units, neighborhood police patrols, rapid response to assaults, robberies, gang violence, home burglaries, crime prevention, semicolon. Address homelessness, retain, attract jobs/businesses, unrestricted general revenue purposes. Shall the measure be adopted approving an ordinance establishing a 1-cent sales tax? So if the city council were to approve funding for projects such as this under the Measure N funds, they would essentially be telling the public, make sure next time you read the fine print on the ballot measure, because all that stuff about gangs and robberies and home burglaries, that was the shiny thing that we waved in front of you in order to get you to vote yes for this, so we could take the money and use it to upgrade the bathrooms in public parks, for which we already have other tax funds. So that's my comment to the city council. Thank you.
Right. Got one more left. Support for the Endangered Species Act compliance, 400,000 allocated for that. Any discussion? Yes.
Why are we opening it up for discussion again when we went through that and just said we're going to vote, period, and now there's not much to discuss? That's just
I'm
a
just
point. That's just a point.
Just being responsive to the request of our
All right.
colleagues that we have some time to discuss.
I appreciate that. I've just never been on committees that, a committee. I'm a committee of one. I think I do better at that.
It's easier that way, huh? All right. Looking at my colleagues for any action on this one.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. I believe this does meet the Measure N requirements. The compliance with not only the Endangered Species Act, but all of CEQA is a challenge for developers. And if we can somehow mitigate that for them, that will encourage economic development. And so I will say, I would like to make a recommendation to approve this item.
I mean, motion.
Yes, a motion, I apologize. Thank you.
Got a motion from Committee Member Coleman. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I will second.
We got a motion from Committee Member Coleman, a second by Committee Member Prince. Any further discussion?
Just a brief comment.
Yeah.
There are many items that are on this list that are worthy objectives and even potentially worthy objectives for the city government to undertake. The question we're asked today is whether this is consistent with the Measure N purpose, and so I'll incorporate by reference my comments on the last item. I think this is a worthy goal. The government encumbers businesses and economic development with numerous burdens, and the Endangered Species Act compliance is one of those burdens, and it may be a worthy objective for the city to aid in that, to encourage economic development, but my opinion is that that is not consistent with the purpose of Measure N. So I voice my opposition to the motion.
Committee Member
I would just
Abernathy?
add that it would be nice if it was labeled. It's been, 47 years, I think, that we're still fighting endangered species and haven't been able to solve it. And these rules keep tightening and make it, housing costs more, street pavements cost more, everything costs more because of that act.
Yes. All right. So we have a motion, a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
No?
Committee Member Madland,
Aye.
Committee Member Dewey. Aye. Committee Member Coman,
Aye.
Committee Member Abernathy,
No?
Committee Member Rojas Mora,
Yes.
Committee Member Prince.
Yes.
Motion is approved with Committee Member Campbell and Committee Member Abernathy voting no, and Committee Member Perez Andreessen absent.
Our next item, please.
Commissioner comments.
All right. Turning to my colleagues.
I'll jump right in.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing these projects with us. We have some disagreements on these things, but I think that's the nature of things, and I think it's our responsibility as committee members to have these discussions. I would just like to see that in the future meeting that we have that structure where we can discuss items before we're required to make a motion, so that I can hear from the various parties that and we all learn as we go. So, but thank you for this. I'm sorry that it got the schedule got all messed up. Would like to have more fluidity. I can't say that word. to that. I would wonder if that there wasn't an opportunity to, when we do the April meeting, and if that's the I'm not sure if there's another one after April, but that those meetings be set at that time. And so that we can all put it on our calendars, and so if you got a business trip coming up, you try to move it around or whatever, or you let that, hey, I'm just not going to be able to make that meeting, and then I think maybe it'll help avoid some of the issues we had this last time. So, but thank you anyway. I appreciate your help.
Committee Member Prince.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question to the city. I know that a few years ago, we actually asked for a light study in regards to the high crime areas to make sure we had enhanced lighting to be a preventive aspect for crime. It's been a few years, and I haven't received a status I haven't seen anything on the agenda in regards to a status. Will we be having any type of status in regards to that in our upcoming meetings?
We can include that, Committee Member Prince. We have made some progress on that. And there's been an annual allocation towards lighting, and admittedly, we have not installed as many lights as we've had funding thus far, and so we're playing a little bit of catch up, but we can do a status update on that. At a recent council committee meeting, our Public Works Director provided some of that information, so we can do that in our April, include that in our April meeting updates.
And I would request that, I know we had a brief discussion about park rangers a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. We had the park ranger supervisor come before a committee at the chamber, and it was really enlightening to get a sense and an update on the boots on the ground perspective of the program. So maybe Mr. Anthony and your ranger supervisor could give this committee an update on how that's going. Any other comments? All right, with that, we are adjourned at 2:13.